Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February Speakers Night meeting of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, Toronto Centre. I'm the President, Ralph Chu, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting tonight. Is there anybody here for the first time tonight? Welcome. This is one of two types of meetings that we have in the Toronto Centre during the period from September until May. So we have a speaker tonight, and then our next meeting, as you'll see later on, is what we call a recreational astronomy night, which is a less formal proceeding, but we'll talk about that later on. In the meantime, for tonight, I'm going to call on our second Vice President, Paul Delaney, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Good evening, everybody. Looks a little bit like my morning class this morning, a little sparse. Yeah, any excuse to stay at home and get away from the snow. As Ralph has indicated, my pleasure in introducing our guest speaker tonight, who actually needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce her anyway. I've had the pleasure of knowing Rachel for 15 years, getting close now. What can I say? Needless to say, she heralded from York. She completed her Bachelor of Science degree, and then we shoveled her over to McMaster University, where she completed her master's degree and her PhD. But her love of astronomy and science outreach in general started at York, blossomed over there at McMaster University with their Planetarium and the Origins Institute's 3D theater. Sidewalk Astronomy received its inaugural activity there with Rachel, and now, of course, she backstops the Ontario Science Centre. And we've said it many times, it's her fault that we're back here. So thank you once again for bringing us back home. Tonight, seemed appropriate. We tried to do this last November. We got a little sidetracked. You got stuck with me. Tonight, you get the real thing. Rachel will tell us all about what's happening here at the Ontario Science Centre. Rachel.
Thank you very much, Paul and Ralph and everyone for inviting me to come speak. I'm very, very flattered and honored to be here to talk to you today. I wasn't really sure where to begin, so I thought sort of begin at the beginning of my astronomy journey and sort of talk a little bit about how I ended up here at the Ontario Science Centre, give you sort of a behind-the-scenes glimpse of what it's like to work here, the astronomy programs that I've worked on with you here since I started in 2015, and what we have planned for the coming year that I hope you'll join us in as well. So Paul mentioned, oh, I don't know how that happened. Oh, that's the wrong PowerPoint. Let me get the escape. All right, sorry. Here we go. Lots of moving parts here. All right, so I've called this presentation Space Stories. So you can think of it as a couple different vignettes, stories along the way to give you a sense of what my journey's been like and what it's like to work here. Some really funny experiences, some really strange experiences, and it's always fun here at the Ontario Science Centre. So I'm really excited to share all this with you and talk a bit about my motivation and my love of astronomy and where that started. So as Paul mentioned, that I got my start academically at York University. Some of you who've been there may recognize the 40-centimeter telescope, which was my first love when it came to a telescope. So that photo is probably from, as Paul said, almost 15 years ago. And that was where I started my academic career in my undergraduate degree. And then that brought me, as Paul said, through my time at York and McMaster, and ultimately here to the Ontario Science Centre. This is the moment I got my lab coat, and as you can see, this is a childhood dream come true for me. It's pretty much written all over my face that that's sort of the culmination of a lot of work and love for astronomy and love for outreach especially that brought me here. And for many who host here at the Ontario Science Centre, there is no better job. It's fun to get to play and teach people and share love of science with our visitors every day. And so we're really, really lucky to be able to do that. The very first thing that sparked my interest in astronomy, though, was looking up at the stars when I was young, looking up at the constellations, and in particular, the constellation of Orion. I always remember my dad pointing that one out to me, and it sounded like my brother's name, Ryan, and so that immediately became my favorite because I looked up to my brother. And ultimately ended up being a focus of some of my research that I worked on when I was doing my academic degree. You're seeing here a zoom in of the Orion, the Horsehead Nebula in the Orion constellation, going from an image to almost a three-dimensional rendering here, looking at it in the infrared. And this video I really like because it touches on a few different things that I explored in my thesis, which was how stars form, how we understand how they form in molecular clouds like these cold clouds of gas and dust, some of the coldest places in the universe, and ultimately model what those look like using simulations, computer simulations, and then comparing those to observations. And so I did get an opportunity to use telescopes, as you saw me hugging that one earlier, but also use supercomputers. Kind of look like this today. This is the very first computer. This is the ENIAC Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, I believe it stands for, in 1946. So this is what the very first computer looked like. And it's kind of what supercomputers look like today. Usually it's a room that's very heavily cooled. You've got many, many banks of cores all working together. And what a supercomputer allows you to do is it allows you to run simulations which you wouldn't be able to do on a single computer. If you had a single computer, it maybe would take 100 years to run such a simulation. And so what's very cool about working in computational astrophysics here in Ontario is there's a consortium of supercomputers that allow you to run these types of simulations, and so I was very fortunate to be able to do that and actually model how stars form on machines that would take otherwise over 100 years to run. And what's particularly interesting about this for me is because typically in computational astrophysics or theoretical physics or just physics in general, there aren't a lot of women. And so you consider the fact that the very first computers were women. And so these are some images of the Harvard computers in the late 1800s. They're called the Harvard computers. They're at Harvard University. And Sir Edmund Pickering had a team of women that were incredibly influential and made a number of astonishing discoveries, had huge impact on the field of astronomy. And they were analyzing spectra of stars and doing such incredible, important work. And they were the machines, they were the mathematicians, they were the ones that were processing and analyzing all the data before there were computers available to be able to do that. And anyone who's seen the films Hidden Figures may recognize some of the people here, Dorothy Vaughan and Katherine Johnson, also very important, the women that were crucial to the Apollo programs and the NASA programs at that time in order to have such successful missions and launch. So these are some heroes for me personally, and something that I always think is very, very important to highlight. And one particular figure that I always get a kick out of this photo, this is Margaret Hamilton. She was the lead flight software designer for NASA. She worked at MIT and was influential on the Apollo missions, and her software was crucial for that famous Apollo 11 landing. And you know you've made it when you have a Lego figure. So last year, Lego came out with this incredible series, Women of NASA, and I bought 2 boxes. Actually, to be truthful, I didn't buy them. They were gifted to me. It's because people know I love this sort of thing. But you have Margaret Hamilton, Nancy Roman, crucial for the Hubble Space Telescope, Mae Jemison, and Sally Ride. And when I saw that Margaret Hamilton was in here, who was like such a hero for me, I was like, I need to have this, and I have this, and it sits on my desk. So it's something that's been very influential, and it's a focus of what we try and do here at the Science Center too, is provide different types of role models, give platform and visibility to women and minorities, others who may not have opportunities otherwise to be exposed to scientists. We want to be able to not only expose them to who is a scientist, who can be a scientist, what does a scientist look like, what does a scientist do, and give visitors the opportunities to interact with scientists from all different backgrounds. And that is a great segue for one of the first programs that we have coming up this Sunday, February 11th in the afternoon for International Day of Women and Girls in Science. We are from 11 to 2 celebrating women in science. Many different women and girls from a lot of different disciplines. Some of you may know Keely Aird from STEM Kids Rock. So she's going to be one of our presenters, and also Arushi is going to be one of our presenters as well. The Nath family will be joining us that afternoon. So if you're interested in hearing from them and meeting some other women and girls from in and around Ontario, we have engineers, we have physicians, we have researchers from a number of different disciplines joining us on Sunday. So this is a really incredible program. For those of you who don't know Arushi, she's 8 years old. Her and the Nath family, they're a maker family, and they work on a number of wonderful projects, recent winners of the NASA Space Apps Challenge, and this is one of her projects that she's worked on that she's going to be talking about. And so not only giving profile to women in science, but also girls that want to grow up to be scientists and engineers and work in technology and math. So that's a program that we have coming up this Sunday. And definitely check it out on social media as well. If you're unable to join us, we will be having some opportunities to see certain interviews on Facebook Live as well. So working at the Ontario Science Centre is different every single day. So I started here in 2015, and during that time I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things, a lot of really weird things. So I got to meet Julie Payette. So that was last November, which was absolutely incredible. That was at the Canadian Science Policy Conference. So such a wonderful opportunity. So you get to meet a lot of really incredible people working here. The one right in the image right beside there, you might not be able to tell, that's actually Elijah Wood. He came here to DJ an event that I was hosting, and so that was pretty cool. I had the opportunity to do a soapbox science event. So last September, there was, as part of Word on the Street, Ontario Science Centre worked together with Ryerson University to bring soapbox science to the Harbourfront Centre and the Word on the Street Festival. And what soapbox science is, similar to what I've been talking about earlier, an opportunity to provide a platform for women to speak about their science, specifically women who are working on their PhDs or have their PhDs. And so I spoke for an hour on a soapbox in like the hottest day, talking to people about my research project that I worked on, just as I mentioned to you earlier, that conversation about how do stars form, the work that I did using really cool, powerful supercomputers. And it's really interesting when there's a lot of other things going on to be just confined to a soapbox with a prop and trying to grab anybody who's passing by. But fortunately, in all my years at York and McMaster and finally here at the Science Centre, I've gotten pretty good at shouting at people and yelling at people, and not in a mean way, but in an enthusiastic way to share my passion for science, and specifically astronomy. So again, with these images, you might look at them and think that this is not what you would expect an astronomer to do. You got to walk a tightrope, which is kind of indicative. It's kind of good visual of what it's like to work here sometimes. It's a bit of a balancing act, but that's from our circus exhibition that we had here in 2016. Last year, in 2016 as well, we had an exhibition here that I worked on, which was Mammoths and Mastodons, which was a phenomenal exhibition developed by the Field Museum. And so this is actually back at McMaster University at their Ancient DNA Center, and getting an opportunity to go into their lab, into their clean room, and actually see, you know, giant sloth bone and hair from a woolly mammoth was absolutely incredible. So sharing with you all these different types of programs that I've worked on, one that really stands out that was pretty cool is I actually got to help create some of the social media posts when the Blue Jays first went to the postseason. So that was pretty fun doing some of the research on that. And that one was quite well received by Blue Jays fans. last year we worked on a series which we call hotspots. So hotspots are, we present them in our hot zone down on level 6. For those of you who haven't been here, this is very much a Times Square type space. It's a central hub, feeds into many different exhibit halls, and we have a central stage, and we highlight here current science, what's happening in science, or talk about certain topics that are of particular interest to our visitors. And so last year's theme was all about rockets and space. And so this was really interesting for me. I got to work with a team from U of T, which helped to develop this story, work with our team of hosts who helped to present it. And these are the types of slides that we would share with our visitors. We had a much more simplified slide if there was a younger audience. But we always liked to bring out and highlight this graphic of the Saturn V. And I'm particularly glad the timing worked out today, because who saw that SpaceX launch last night? Wasn't that incredible? I gasped out loud when those boosters landed simultaneously. Yeah, that was pretty much a collective, I think all in unison, we all collectively were chanting that as we watched it launch. But sharing with our visitors, how do rockets launch? What type of propellants are used? Why are there different stages? When does separation happen? Focusing on Saturn V, which is the world's most powerful rocket. Now we have to compare that, the Falcon Heavy, the world's second most powerful rocket, but the most powerful rocket launching today. So that's pretty impressive in its own right, the fact that it's a private enterprise. But together with these slides, we also develop a lot of interactives for our visitors. So I brought one for you guys to see today. So I'm going to just, safety first, I want to make sure I'm well shielded. But what we do is we typically work together with a team of educators and hosts and science writers. And that's one of the amazing things for me working here at the Ontario Science Centre, is getting a chance to learn something new every day, but also getting the opportunity to work with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds with such a wealth of knowledge. You always get to learn new things. So typically we would wheel this out. We had a number of other props. We had pump rockets. We had balloons on a string and explaining action, reaction, Newton's third law. And so this particular demonstration was designed to show how rockets launch. So this is ethanol, and so just spray. So this is your fuel. So you need 3 things for combustion. You need fuel, you need heat, and you need oxygen. And so we have fuel, so we just spray a bit of that in there. You want it to vaporize, and then you pump in a little bit of oxygen, and then we have an ignition source here, which is it's the end of a barbecue lighter, really. And then fingers crossed that this works. All right, come on. Oh, okay, it's on fire. So this is what we really didn't want to have happen for SpaceX. So that's a really good demonstration of why it would be bad. But what's really cool about this is that we would pass this around to visitors. They could feel that it's warm, and they could also feel inside and feel that it's wet. And that's not from the ethanol, because the ethanol has evaporated. This is actually water vapor that's created as a product of the combustion. And so we could try that again afterwards, but I think you guys saw sort of what I was going for. And we could try it again one more time to see if we can get it to clear the tube. But so it's great to have interactives to allow the visitors who learn in different ways to have the opportunity to experience and try things and see things differently rather than just presenting with a lecture slide. Is the sound okay, even though I put the lab coat on? We're good? Okay. And so on the same theme of rockets, this is the launch of New Horizons in 2006. And this is a particularly incredible moment because I remember being in my second year Galaxies in the Universe class at York University, and we stopped class. One of the students had a laptop. He opened it up, and we all watched this happen, knowing that in 9 years that it would finally reach Pluto in 2015. It's quite a remarkable moment. Furthest the spacecraft, the fastest that a spacecraft has ever been launched. And then, of course, it arrived, and Pluto was and is spectacular. This is one of the most stunning images showing the heart of Pluto, and this is one of the first opportunities that I had when I started here at the Science Center. Another aspect of working at the Science Center in astronomy is we get a lot of calls and we get a lot of questions about astronomy and space, a lot of requests from the media and from visitors to explain certain things, certain events that are happening. So the very first call that we received was about Pluto, and I was so excited. It's like, I've been waiting for this for 9 years, and it's finally there, and this is incredible. And I remember, just as I told you, I remember seeing that rocket launch and how excited I was for the moment that it was going to arrive. And then I started to get asked questions. It's like, okay, well, you know, they're going to ask you questions about Pluto, but don't worry, you're the expert. You're the expert about Pluto. It's like, I don't like that word. What are you talking about? I'm not an I'm like, I'm not the principal investigator on the mission. I'm not a planetary scientist. I didn't do my thesis on planets or on Pluto. So it's like, you're throwing around the expert very, you know, fast and loose there. So imposter syndrome is real. Lots of people have it. This is sort of how I felt in that moment and how I still feel on many days. Certainly how I felt a lot during my academic career as well. And I think many feel that way. But breathing, as you see in the third panel, is helpful. and diving right in and you know, just giving it a shot and giving it a try. And so it ended up working out, and it ended up being a lot of fun. So I've had the opportunity to do a lot of that kind of work since then. And of course, I can't pass up a chance to highlight some of those discoveries from New Horizons. And something that we're going to be focusing on very, very early on next year is, of course, the arrival of New Horizons on January 1st, 2019 at the next target in the Kuiper Belt. So that's something that is on our radar here at the Science Center, and something that we're going to definitely be developing some programming around, because there's certainly no love lost for Pluto. Lots of people love Pluto. And some of these discoveries of floating ice mountains, things that geologically didn't really make sense, still don't really make sense. We don't fully understand all these things that we're seeing on Pluto. Looks like methane snow on caps of mountains, possibly volcanic, looked like water ice or some form of ice. Blue skies, these tholins, these particles that are in the atmosphere of Pluto. The fact that Pluto even had an atmosphere, I didn't realize that it did until we saw this stunning shot of Pluto backlit from the sun. You got to see this blue haze surrounding it, created by the particles in the atmosphere on Pluto. Possibly lakes of liquid nitrogen. It's just stunning. I mean, the New Horizons passed by almost, it'll be 3 years this year, and still such a wealth of knowledge to learn about in terms of what's happening with Pluto and what's happening with 2014 MU69. So you can see the target there on the move. So that's where it's headed next. Anticipated flyby is January 1st, 2019. So that's going to be one of our next big events here at the Science Center, is to highlight this. This is going leaping ahead a little bit, talking about 2019, but something I didn't want to pass up a chance to mention. So mixing in a little bit of information about some things that are on the horizon, but certainly still incredibly exciting. Mars. Everybody loves Mars. And this is a big, big year for Mars. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. This is one of the graphics that was developed when the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter first measured recurring slope lineae on Mars. These dark streaks, these seasonal flows that we're seeing on Mars. This is one of the graphics that appeared in our hot zone that I helped work on. And it's quite cute image of Mars getting sweaty in the summer. And so this got quite a lot of attention. There was a press conference when this announcement was made. And typically when an event like that is scheduled, we like to do something in our hot zone, that area where we do present current science. And so I can't really tell you about anything that's planned coming up this year in terms of current science or press releases that are going to come from NASA, because I don't know about those yet. But we're always trying to do them, and they're always really fun. This one in particular was quite exciting because I remember I had an earpiece in, getting the information about what was happening, and I had some of my colleagues were saying, talk about it, talk about it. I'm like, they haven't said what the thing is yet. They're just telling us stuff we already know. I can't talk about it yet. And so we're like, vamp. So I'm trying to, like, you know, hey, everybody, Mars, isn't this exciting? We're going to have an incredible announcement, at the same time trying to hear what the actual results were. So that was pretty fun and quite an interesting challenge, and ended up leading to probably the weirdest moment of my life so far, which was getting interviewed for the Canadian equivalent of The Daily Show, I guess, or what was the Colbert Report. And so I'll give you guys a chance to watch this. This is the weirdest interview I've ever had, and it's quite interesting.
It's official. There's liquid water on the surface of Mars. But what does that mean for basic cable subscribers like you? I took a Star Trek to the Ontario Science Centre to find out. Dr. Ward-Maxwell, you're an expert in ...
There's that word, expert. I'm an expert in astrophysics.
Cool. And on top of astrophysics, you know your planets and stuff?
Yes, I know my planets as well.
Good, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. Water on Mars. Why?
It's very exciting because where there's water, there could be life.
Is it water like here, or is it like space water?
So it's water like here, except it's not pure. It's very salty.
Can we drink it?
No, so it wouldn't be drinkable. So this
Not
water...
Not even a taste, just to say we did it?
A lot more studies have to be done to determine the nature of the water that's flowing on Mars.
Say we find microbial life in the water. What does that mean for the Blue Jays?
I think it means that they're going to win the World Series.
Do you know what Joey Bat said about water on Mars?
What did Joey Bat say about water on Mars?
Oh, I don't know. You're the astrophysicist. I thought maybe you'd know. Who's your favorite Blue Jay?
I'm going to say I really like Marcus Stroman right now.
Yeah, he's a stud.
He's pumped.
Yeah. What about Josh Donaldson? He's adorbs.
Yeah.
And he's the bringer of rain, which Mars could use.
That is true.
Say science gets its act together and I could visit Mars tomorrow. What will I experience?
It would actually take you at least 8 months to get there. Then once they reach the surface, they are heavily bombarded with radiation from our sun. There's no oxygen in the air, like the oxygen that we have in our air that we need to breathe.
You lost me at 8 months. Have you seen The Martian yet?
Yes, I have.
Is it any good?
Yeah, it's excellent.
Ooh, does he die in it? Don't tell me, but he dies, right? Oh, does he drink the water? He drank the water, didn't he? When will actors ever learn? Thanks, Dr. Rachel. The Martian is in theaters now. See it with someone you love. For the Late O'Clock News, I'm Paul Lemieux.
So that's a typical day at the Ontario Science Centre. That was not live. That was not live, clearly, but he did certainly catch me off guard with the baseball questions. He looked me up. He looked at my Twitter handle, and of course around that time I was tweeting a lot about the Blue Jays. So, so that's sort of how he started on that tact, which was quite interesting. So a lot of attention about water on Mars, flowing water on Mars. Here's some images of these recurring slope lineae that you can see these streaks that I've been referring to. But is it water on Mars? So this is actually a study. It was reported on at the was just a few days before I was scheduled to give this talk last year, so end of November 2017. So another study is arguing that it's not flowing water, it's flowing sand. So a lot of that attention about water on Mars, flowing water on Mars, it may actually not be flowing water. And what's something that's really interesting is that there's often a lot of media attention, a lot of reports about a discovery like that, but then if there's a counter study or there's debate or discussion, it's still meant for interpretation. People accept it as, oh, well, you know, this is what this leading study said, and this is what we currently believe. But if there's a counter argument, or that becomes our new understanding of what is actually the case as to what's happening on Mars, often that doesn't get reported as much, or often it doesn't get highlighted. So that's something that we try to incorporate into our planetarium shows and into the different work that we do here, is try to keep everyone up to date on what the current understanding of different aspects of science are, and also explain the process of science, that this is all part of it, and that it's fluid, and that things are constantly being tested and explored, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. And I think that helps everyone be more analytical and critical thinkers overall. Another program that we worked on last year was our program that we piloted called Junior Skywatchers. And this was a program, it was developed by the Astronomical Society for the Pacific, and it was called My Sky Tonight. And this was a series of workshops that was developed for educators who wanted to run astronomy programs for children between the ages of 3 and 5. And get them excited about space, and get them excited about astronomy in the night sky. And we have a very strong population, a strong visitor population in that age group, especially in our KidSpark area, where we welcome families with children under 8. And so together with the coordinator of KidSpark, her and I began this workshop, which was four Saturdays in October, where we ran these programs for kids between the ages of 3 and 5. And it was incredibly fun and very, very well received, and we're actually doing it again this April. So on Saturdays in April at 11 o'clock, this is going to be we're going to be running it again. The first week is all about making observations. So we do things like I Spy, we allow them to look through telescopes, allow them to look through binoculars for the first time, understand that they actually get to see something far away closer, or something that looks small looks bigger. Second week focuses on light and shadows, and how shadows are created and how they change depending on where the sun is. Third week we talk about phases of the moon, so we don't get into three-dimensional models of what's happening, but we just want them to recognize that sometimes the moon looks different and learn the proper names for the different phases. So we do a lot of matching games with that. And then the last week, we get them to learn about what different tools astronauts need when they go to space. So we talk about all the different gear they have, their boots, their gloves, their helmets, their oxygen tanks. This one was a jetpack originally, which was why it had flames shooting out the bottom. But they get to make all their own gear, and there's always a takeaway that they get to take home with them. And one of the ones that we really loved, this was for the Phases of the Moon activity. So we had these guides that had the names of all the different phases, and just a mat for a picture frame. They just glue that on there, and we had popsicle sticks. And then when we encouraged them next time they went out to look at the moon, to hold up their window frame and put the moon in the center, and then learn what phase they're seeing. So they can hold it up and compare each night to what they're seeing, so that they can learn the different names for the different phases of the moon. So at that age, understanding three-dimensional models of what's happening, how the phases are actually happening is far too challenging, but getting them to match and getting them to learn new vocabulary is something that's definitely possible, and that's something that we wanted to encourage. So this is something that we're running this April, and we're really excited to continue that again for kids between the ages of 3 and 5. We're not currently doing pre-registration, but this is testing out this workshop, and we're hoping that if this works well again, that maybe it will motivate us to start doing more regular workshops over a series of weeks in maybe different disciplines, maybe requiring pre-registration, maybe This one was just about 45 minutes long. So maybe we go to longer workshops, maybe we look at something for different ages. So this sort of opens doors to exploring a lot of different types of series of programmings that can run over several weeks. So it's quite exciting. This was one of the assignments we were given as part of the Astronomical Society, the Pacific workshop that we did that motivated this Junior Skywatchers program. And it was interview a child and ask them about the shape of the Earth, right? This might be a good test to give to a lot of people nowadays, not just 3 to 5-year-olds. So this is actually my niece and nephew. So the one on the left was my nephew's answers. He was 6 at the time, and the one on the right was my niece's, who was 3. So the shape of the Earth, he knew it was a sphere, I was impressed with that. She was still more on 2-dimensional shapes, thinking about it as a circle. He had a lot of answers which referred to the Earth spinning in circles, so that was really interesting. She had a lot of answers that were quite cute that referred to, if you dug a hole all the way through the Earth and crawled out the hole, what would you see when you looked out? She said a mouse. But these types of tests, these types of interviews, I just had my brother sit down with them, just ask them a few different questions. They weren't meant to fill anything out. It was more of a conversation, but it's a great insight into what children at that age are thinking about space and astronomy and their understanding, and also some of their misconceptions that we want to make sure that we combat and overcome. And we don't want to necessarily just go into it assuming that they think one thing. We want to get a good understanding of where they're at so we can meet them in the middle. This Junior Skywatchers program ends with a planetarium show, which is our Eyes on the Skies planetarium show targeted for our youngest visitors under the age of 5. This is a very unique program for science centers and planetaria in general. We're one of the first to develop a planetarium show for this audience. But it's one of our most popular offerings where visitors get to come for a planetarium show. It's all about getting them used to looking up, noticing what's up there, getting comfortable with the dark. We point out a few different constellations, some planets that are up. We sing songs like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And then we take a journey to the moon, and they get to fly, they get to land on the moon, they get to see that the moon is a place, and then they get a certificate saying that they landed on the moon. So it's a really, really sweet program. And we tie this at the end of our Junior Skywatchers sessions to the particular theme of that week. And so each time that, if, for example, we're talking about making observations, we're highlighting those instruments that we used. We bring the binoculars into the planetarium. We talk about those different things in that particular session. So it's a bit more of a private show, a bit more of a custom show for those who participate in the workshop. Another program that we've had over the past 2 years is we've worked with Dr. Dave Williams, Canadian astronaut, for several book releases and also for several other events that we've had here as well. Always wonderful to work with him. And so this is, again, one of his books, a children's book called To Burp or Not to Burp. So it's quite an interesting read. Even if you're not a child, you've learned a lot of things about what it's like to live in space and what happens to your body in space. He also had another book that was released last year called How to Train Like an Astronaut. And so these types of events, book launches that are astronomy or space related, these are things that we like to have happen and definitely welcome here at the Science Center. And we hope to have more events like this in the coming year, but nothing currently scheduled. But something I just wanted to highlight, that this is another type of astronomy-related program that we run here. So this particular one was tied to our International Astronomy Day, which is this year is April 21st, and ended up being a wonderful event where our members got a chance to meet Dr. Dave. There was a great series of presentations, lots of opportunity for question and answer, book signings, photo ops, and stuff like that. And so always fun to work with astronauts that come here. So those are some of the types of astronomy and space-related programming that we do related to book launches. So, total lunar eclipse. We had a total lunar eclipse just barely a couple weeks ago, just snuck down there behind the clouds and below the horizon for us here in Toronto. But when I first started back in 2015, it was quite a big deal. There was that total lunar eclipse that happened at the end of September. We got some clouds here, but that didn't stop over 700 people from coming, wanting to look through telescopes at the moon, because it wasn't just a total lunar eclipse. Like the recent one, it was also a super total lunar eclipse. So this is something that I've been battling for a while and I've decided to embrace, which is the supermoon. The supermoon is when the moon is full and it's also at its closest point to the Earth, so it's perigee. So as the moon orbits the Earth, there are moments when it's a little bit closer, perigee, and moments when it's at its furthest from the Earth, that's apogee. And so when it's at perigee and that happens to coincide with a full moon, it looks a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter. It's actually probably more noticeable that it's brighter than it's bigger, because if you factor in the fact that the full moon always looks quite large when it's near the horizon, it's hard to discern whether you're actually seeing it look bigger or whether it's an illusion. But certainly brighter. I believe it's almost 30% brighter. Any opportunity anybody has to go out and look at the moon, I encourage them to do so. If it's being advertised that it's a beautiful moon tonight because it's a supermoon, then go see it. If it's just a clear night, go out and look at the moon. It's beautiful. It's one of the best things to look at. It's one of the best things to look at through binoculars or a telescope, especially if you're in a city. It's one of my favorite things. So that's why I've embraced the supermoon, and take every opportunity to encourage people to look up at the night sky. And speaking of eclipses, some of you may have been here last August if you weren't on your own journey to see totality. We had quite the event here at the Ontario Science Centre. We estimated at over 10,000 people, visitors came to the Ontario Science Centre. And one thing that really amazed me and surprised me was I thought that it was going to be people would take a look, they would see it, and they say, okay, I saw it, and now I'm on my way. Almost everyone stayed for the whole thing. It was just incredible. We had visitors sharing glasses. We had visitors who lined up to look through the telescope. They get to the front, they look, and then they get to the back of the line again, and then by the time they got back to the front, it would look different. And the enthusiasm was just absolutely incredible and so wonderful to be a part of. And it couldn't have been possible without the volunteers from the RAC Toronto Centre, because you guys are troopers, being out there in the sun all day. We were trying to run you water as often as we could, and handling those lines and those visitors who I thought were, once the eclipse happened and the glasses were gone, quite calm about the whole thing, and really very orderly and enthusiastic and excited to share in this moment, in this day with one another. And this is an overhead shot of what it looked like from the Foresters buildings. You could see pretty much no ground there. And we have even a wider shot where you could see all the cars, the lineup of cars turning to pull in. So it was quite a remarkable day. And so can I count on you guys for 2024? Can I get you to sign up now? I know you're all going to be in Hamilton or Niagara, aren't you? I might be too. Next thing I want to highlight, speaking of the sun, is our solar observing that we have once again due to the efforts of the RASC and their solar telescopes. And our solar telescopes are sometimes brought out as well. This is an image actually from our community day with a very appropriate sweater on that young boy. So these are the dates that have been selected for our solar observing, monthly solar observing, which happens on Telescape between 10 a.m. and noon on Saturdays. And these were chosen to coincide with almost a full moon, I believe, so that those who wanted to go dark sky observing wouldn't have to choose and could still come out to help out with solar observing as well without having back-to-back commitments. So hopefully this means there'll be some more telescopes. January 27th was clouded out for solar observing, but still wonderful presence here for the National Star Party and the kickoff to the 150th anniversary of the RASC. And so that was celebrated here in our lobby at the Ontario Science Centre with the live stream as well. So next one is February 24th, so hope to see you there, weather permitting, and the cloud dates are always the following Saturday for those events. Star parties. So star parties are events that we hold here at the Ontario Science Centre, typically about 4 a year, and usually they involve telescope observing provided by the RASC, weather permitting. Oftentimes we have music, we have speakers, typically professional astronomer, or we sometimes have storytellers come and join us. Lots of activities provided by our hosts, sometimes crafts, so it can be quite varied. We've got a couple of different themes planned for this year. April 21st, as I already mentioned, that's International Astronomy Day, so that's what we'll be celebrating on that day. June 23rd, tentatively referred to right now as Planet Parade because there's a lot of planets up at that time, and so it's going to be quite a nice night for observing. Fingers crossed for clear skies. August 11th is around the time of the Perseid meteor shower, so hopefully we'll be able to see if it's not too bright from the city's light pollution, we'll be able to maybe see a few meteors passing overhead. And then October 13th is in celebration of World Space Week. And so those are the 4 dates that we've chosen this year. The times are still to be determined. Usually start about a half an hour after sunset, but they're a bit fluid depending on the time of year. Usually between 7:30 and 10:30 though. So keep an eye out for those events that we have planned. Special treat this year, 2018, I mentioned earlier, is a big year for Mars. So Mars Fest 2.0. So in 2003, Mars was at its closest, that was the last time that Mars was at its closest to the Earth. And it was also the origin of the Mars is going to look as big as the full moon hoax, which has been, I remember the first call that we got at York about that, and I still get calls. But that's not what it's going to look like. It's maybe going to look maybe more kind of like that, maybe? even that's probably too big. But it's going to look really, really good. I just wanted to share something with you that was quite interesting. I found a copy of Scope from October 2003. This is how much of a hoarder I am. I still had this in my files. Mars Fest 2003. So lovely letter here of thanks from Sarah Poirier, my predecessor, mentioning that they estimated the grand total of visitors who came to the Ontario Science Centre to see Mars through telescopes was 6,200. That was 15 years ago, before social media was a really, really big thing. Wow, I don't know what to expect this year, but if it's anything like what we saw with the Eclipse, we might see quite a lot of crowds. So we're planning a few different things. One thing that we're exploring is the date is of opposition is Friday, July 27th, but it's going to look quite good for quite a while before and after those dates. What's also interesting about this date is there's a full moon up at the same time. So it's not the most ideal viewing conditions on this date, even though this is the particular date that it's supposed to be closest. So it'll still look excellent at the Star Party on August 11th, but we still want to take this opportunity to celebrate Mars and promote Mars. So we're considering having a series of events on Fridays leading up to that date, just to have an opportunity perhaps to observe and have some Mars-themed activities. So that's something that we're considering. Any feedback that you may have about that, I've touched base with Ian about that, and we've been chatting about different ideas. But if you do want to have a flashback, a nice visit to the past, I encourage you to come up and take a flip through this issue of Scope. Some comments from Katrina in Slum, Tony Horvatin, all about their experiences here at the Science Center on that day. Katrina's, the following is my conversation from last night times 500. Please do not touch the scope. Please do not touch the scope. Please do not touch the scope. About $1,000. It's a Maxitov, which means there are 2 mirrors, and that's why the image is not upside down. About 100 times magnification. The orange filter is for contrast and helps the darker stuff stand out. Can you see it? Please do not touch the scope. So kind of blast from the past there, but I got quite a kick out of that. So I hope to see you all there this summer as well as you join us for Mars Fest 2.0 at the Ontario Science Centre. Another thing that I'm currently working on is the development of a new planetarium show. So these are some shots of the interior of our planetarium. For those of you who haven't been in our planetarium, it's a 7.2 meter dome, a digital planetarium, and it's what's really lovely about it. We have beanbag seating, so you can lie back and look up at the night sky. What's really lovely about it is we have the freedom and flexibility to use the software to create all of our shows in-house. So we don't purchase shows, we develop everything here at the Ontario Science Centre, and we also, all of our shows are presented by live presenters, hosts. So that's also quite special and unique, and it also gives visitors the interaction of asking questions and guiding the show in some cases. So this was a show I developed a few years ago to tie with an exhibition that we had called Wild Weather. So this was celestial storms, which focused on the weather on different planets in our solar system. So the theme of the next show will likely be about exoplanets. What is a planet in general, and then specifically focusing on exoplanets. So that's something that we are working on, a launch date to be determined, but wanted to give you guys the opportunity to hear that first from me here. So there will be a new planetarium show here at the Ontario Science Centre in this coming year. And I have quite a few ideas for several after that as well. So lots of exciting things coming in on that side of things. This summer, our temporary exhibition that's going to be coming is Popnology, from sci-fi to Wi-Fi. So what's really cool about this is the fusion of pop culture and technology. So it's the science of science fiction. It's how science fiction has shaped our future. There's lots of elements from pop culture, from Star Trek and Star Wars and Back to the Future. And there's a couple to scale models that will be here of Mars rovers. So you could see there Sojourner with Pathfinder. I believe that's Opportunity in the background there. So that'll be here from May 19th to August 6th. So I definitely encourage you to come and check that out. And so we're hoping to develop a lot of programming related to that. It'll tie nicely to the Mars events that we'll have planned in July, and also to some other programs that we hope to develop related to lots of fun elements of pop culture. So I think that's going to be a really wonderful exhibition, and as a super nerd, I'm really excited about it. One of the images had R2-D2 in it, and I squeed, and so that was really cool. So I just want to wrap up by talking a little bit more specifically about the collaborations that we've worked on here at the Ontario Science Centre with the RASC Toronto Centre. And really, I think no more successfully than a perfect example of great partnership was last September when, as part of the first Charles Darrow lecture, we welcomed Dr. Jill Tarter here to the Ontario Science Centre. You can see our group there just prior to Jill's talk as one of 4 speakers that we had in our inaugural Great Conversations speaker series. Very successful series of events, which included other speakers, Scott Kelly, Dr. David Julius, and David Suzuki. And so We hope to have another series of great conversations in the near future, and I'm very enthusiastic and interested to hear who the next Charles Darrow speaker will be, and hope that we'll be able to offer our visitors another great experience that they had with Jill, who was so inspiring and gave such an incredible talk. And if you weren't able to be there, I encourage you to go. I believe it's on the RASC YouTube channel that you can watch her presentation, which was just very wonderful and inspiring. What a legend she is. Really, we couldn't do so many of these astronomy programs that I've talked about without you. This is a post on our Instagram page celebrating you as part of National Volunteer Week last year. Some awesome images of you guys at your best in one of our solar observing sessions. So I want to take this moment to thank you all for all the efforts that you do to make our astronomy programs all the richer, and share your expertise with our visitors and give them the opportunity to look through a telescope, which they may otherwise not have the opportunity to do. And by joining forces with us here at the Ontario Science Centre, give that opportunity to even more people and expand that reach. And on a personal note, I want to particularly thank Paul Delaney, who he mentioned right at the beginning that, and I mentioned at the beginning that, we've known each other for quite a long time, 15 years. And I really attribute pretty much being here to Paul, and pretty much my entire astronomy career to Paul. So I really just wanted to throw this up here. This is in the acknowledgements of my PhD thesis. So I'll just take this moment to read it. Paul, until the day I met you, I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grow up. You were the one who convinced me to study astronomy and join the observatory team, instilling in me a lifelong love of education and public outreach. Working for you at the observatory that first summer of my undergraduate degree also led to the most important moment of my life personally, the moment when a young A.J. Maxwell walked through your office door and said hello. So that's my husband. And so on that note, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and the stories that I had to share of what it's like to work at the Science Center, my journey, and some of the astronomy events that we have coming up in the coming year that I hope you all join us to. Thank you.
I'll say wow again. Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. So why don't we let you at them, or let them at you for about another 10-15 minutes, and then we'll pass it over to Ralph and the after images. Sure. So do I hand this around, or do I, what do I do, Andrew, with the, yeah, right, okay. You're assuming that I can see people here. Where are you, Sean?
We got a runner.
Right,
we got a runner.
Okay. Thank you.
What do I find most exhilarating about my job? I think I really love getting to learn new things. That's something that's always appealed to me about being a scientist, getting the opportunity to learn new things, and the fact that I still get to do that in my job every day is something that's really rewarding. I really get a kick out of meeting cool people. That's always fun. It's hard to stop being awestruck and have my jaw drop. I think that's good. I don't want to ever lose that sense of wonder. So that's always fun too. But in a practical sense, it's really exhilarating to get to come to work every day and be creative and be inspired by my colleagues and get to learn something new. Does anybody have any ideas for any types of astronomy programs that I didn't mention, or things that we could expand on in those themes? Yeah, sure.
So when you were in university, I went to York University myself as well, actually. Did you see yourself being where you are today?
I think it's hard to see that far into the future. I think I hoped that I would have the opportunities that I've had, certainly. When I first started, I really didn't even know I wanted to do astronomy at first when I started, and I think that's very much, that's okay. I think a lot of kids, when they're in high school, they feel like they have to know exactly what their whole life is going to be all planned out. And certainly for me, when I was going from high school to university, I wasn't even 100% sure that I wanted to study astronomy. And then to have done the whole academic path, and well, I'm really glad that I did that. I sort of always knew that I wanted to do something with outreach and science communication. That was really what, working with the public, sharing my passion for science, and doing something related to science education was really important to me. And there's so many great opportunities now. Not that there weren't then, but there certainly are. Laurentian University just started a master's program in science communication. Seneca has a program on science communication now. So I really was, if I wasn't here, I was really going to do everything I could to try to end up here. So I was really just working towards taking any opportunity that came my way and exploring those types of programs, and getting the host job here was amazing. And so I did that first before I started as a researcher, and that's something that I remember my supervisor asked me at one point, if you can see yourself doing anything other than research, what could you see yourself doing? So working at the Ontario Science Centre. I grew up outside of Toronto, so for me this was one of the only science centres I'd visited. I've been to Science North, which is also wonderful, but this one being close to home and being sort of this hub of science communication, it was sort of the goal for me at that time. But I was also, when I was in my undergrad, when I was at York, I was also just trying to get through it too. And there was that side of things as well, just trying to take it one day at a time. So that's probably a more truthful answer. But yeah, the dreams were certainly there at that time as well. Yeah.
A comment and two questions.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I so appreciate what you've done to get us back into the Science Center. I think we belong here, so thank you very much for that. What aspect of astronomy do you think most turns kids on, especially the teen years? Like you have a number of things for grade 5s as they're 5-year-olds, but what sort of thing do you think most relates? And then I'll ask you the other question and when you answer it.
That's a good question about what is most interesting to teens about astronomy. I think astronomy is a really accessible science in general for everyone. It seems that everyone has enthusiasm for astronomy and space. It's kind of like dinosaurs too. Everybody, it's in pop culture, it's interesting, you don't really have to have a lab. You can just go up in the night sky and the universe is your lab. You just look up at the sky. If you want to have an impact on research in the field, even amateur astronomy is so important to advancing science, and so you can take that upon yourself and make an impact that way too. So I think that's why astronomy is really, really accessible as a science to the public. Black holes are always really popular with every age, I think. I would say that starting to get into the more complex, weird type stuff like quantum physics and cosmology, early universe, models that are a little bit more complicated about what happened in the early universe, how did the first galaxies form, what is dark matter, what is dark energy. Those are very open questions, and I think that might be something that would be interesting for an older age group of youth. Younger ages, they might want more answers. They might want to just consume and learn as much as they can about planets and the stars and galaxies and things like that. But once you start to push a little bit more and get a little bit, let's think about this a little bit deeper. Let's get a little bit more complicated. Let's go after the things that we don't have answers for yet. not to say that we have answers for planets and stars and galaxies and all that stuff, but once you start to get to the more quirky stuff, where you get teens and just anybody saying, wait, what? Like, seriously? Like, that mind blown kind of reaction, I think that would get them hooked. Yeah. You had a second question? Oh, sure. See, the hosts that do this every day, they're the pros. It's been a while since I've done this, so they've got the technique down pat. All right. You know, and of course it worked before y'all got here. So I took it out, I tested it. Oh, you know, this is going to be so fun. You know, it's kind of like a neat prop. I can make like a little thing explode. It'll be cool. Okay, I sprayed it 3 times this time now. No. You can hear it. There we go. So you need a giant countdown clock, like.
Now you can fly to SpaceX.
Experiment, keep trying, keep testing, refine until you get it to work, and then repeat it over and over and over again.
You had any programs in astroimaging or photography for the Science Center?
That's not
Holding
something,
workshops or whatever you want to call it. For
that's not something that, I don't believe we've done that before. That's something that definitely I think there'd be a lot of visitor interest in, that sort of thing. We have run the RASC NOVA programs here in the past, which I didn't think at that time had an astrophotography component, but I think maybe does now. Maybe is there? I don't know, not currently. So that's something that I think would have a lot of appeal. And
it's so easy nowadays for these, everything from cell phones to just point and shoot cameras can be used and take home a picture.
yeah,
Whatever.
that's a really great idea. Another thing that I think is interesting, and I talked to Allard about this at one point, was brought up, was there was a time when, I think, you were building your telescope and you had your talk, and it really inspired me. And I think you mentioned that there was a period where people weren't really building telescopes because it was kind of cost effective to just, well, I don't need to build it because I can just buy one. But if you want something custom and personalized, then there's such an advantage to building your own. And I think there's today, you know, with so many people like the maker movement and the uprise of maker spaces all over the city. We have a maker space here now in our inventorium space at the Science Center. That could be something that might be really interesting to do those types of, you know, builder, maker type astronomy related activities. So definitely would welcome any input from you if you guys have any ideas about maybe some maker type astronomy themed workshops that maybe we could explore running here. Yeah, because I think, yeah.
Oh, keep going. How many calendars do you want? All right, so let me put that down here. Are you taking my job, by the way? Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. In that case, I'm going to hand this to the president.
Okay. Well, you know, it's been great to see what goes on at the Science Center when we're not here. It takes me back because actually in 1970 to 73, I had your job.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, we had an awful lot of stuff going on Friday nights, which interfered with me getting down to the McLaughlin Planetarium for center meetings because they were held on Friday nights. but we really must talk sometime about some of those things. But it's been great to hear about things, and we want to thank you very much for making it possible for us to get back here, and for your constant support to make it possible for us to help out with all of the programs here. And a little token of appreciation, we have a RASC calendar for you to hang up on your wall. So
it's going to go up in my office, in my cubicle. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
And you're going to do some announcements?
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, great. So we'll finish up with the announcements for next little while. And our next meeting is in 2 weeks, on the 21st, and that's going to be our recreational astronomy night. So we've got Dennis Gray, who will be presenting the sky this month, Blake Nancrow talking about double stars, and at last check, we still have an open slot for that evening. So if anybody has a talk they'd like to give. Adrian, are you doing one actually? Okay, great. What are you going to be talking about? Balcony astroimaging. This should be fun. I would say so, yes. Okay, well, so we got a full program. That should be fun. All right. So that again on the 21st. 2 weeks after that, we have another speakers night here at the Science Center. Still working on a speaker. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully we'll have that for our next meeting, so we'll be able to tell you who's coming for that evening. As mentioned, we are doing our solar viewing here once a month on Saturdays, and the next scheduled date is the 24th of February. Hopefully it'll be cool, it'll be clearer and a little bit warmer than the last few weekends, and so again, if you can help out with that, it'll be Sean's job to say whether we're a go or no go for that particular occasion. We also have our monthly evening star parties. So the week beginning the 12th, we have the first clear night, which will not be at Long Sault Conservation Area. Rather, it will be at Glen Major Forest in York Region, and a little bit closer and a little bit more accessible, perhaps, for the Dark Sky Star Party. And Mark, I believe you're handling that evening? Yeah, so Mark Teitelbaum will be giving the go or no-go announcement for that event. The following week will be our City Star Party at Bayview Village Park. That location is not changing, and again, it will be the first clear night of that week. The Carr Astronomical Observatory is our dark sky site up near Collingwood, and again, we remind you that although the access road is closed, the facility is still available to you. The last couple of weekends, we've had scout groups up there doing their winter astronomy camps. There hasn't been a great deal of observing, unfortunately, because of the weather, and actually, last weekend's group couldn't get into the observatory because of the snowdrift. You know, typically we get a 12-foot or so snowdrift right in front of the observatory door, and they got it that way this weekend, despite our nice weather down here the last few weeks that took away all the snow. It's up there and it's still there. Anyway, you can get up there, and you just need to use the online reservation form to book your stay. Reminder that one of the benefits of membership is our telescope loan program. We have 2 of our 3 managers here this evening, so that again, if you are interested in finding out about the availability of the equipment, please talk to either Mark or George. Okay, and finally, meeting after the meeting. This is an early evening, so We'll be repairing to the Granite Brew Pub down at Mount Pleasant and Eglinton for a bite to eat and a drink, and everybody's welcome to join us there. And that is it for the announcements that I have. We do have 2 calendars left available for sale, if anybody is interested in getting one of those. And otherwise, is there any other announcements? Going once, going twice? No. Okay. Yes. We did have the National Star Party on January 27th to kick off the 150th anniversary of the RASC. And again, I'd like to extend our thanks to those of our members who helped out that day. We were quite busy, actually, right through until about 7 o'clock or so, when people started leaving and it became futile to try and say hello to them. So anyway, good evening there, and quite successful. And I understand that we're going to be doing it again later on this year, a second National Star Party for the RASC. Okay, so that's it. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Have a safe trip home.